What was the creepiest experience in your own home? In a house living with my girlfriend and another couple, I'm watching TV at around 2 AM in the living room. Girlfriend is asleep, other guy is asleep, and I assume the other girl is out in her study, which you had to go outside to get to, so the back door is unlocked. From my vantage point you can see a portion of the kitchen, which is next to the back door. I hear the back door swing open, assume it's my housemate and continue watching my TV show. About 15 minutes later, I happen to glance through the doorway into the kitchen, as I hadn't heard my housemate either leave the house again or wander through to the bedrooms. House is quite loud, and there's a guy standing in the corner of the kitchen staring at me. He had a brown jacket on, dark eyes and dark hair, and was clutching a bottle of my Midori, shoulders slumped, staring at me. When he sees that I've noticed him, he moves. I get up from the floor and chase him to the kitchen, but he's gone. Carefully go out the back, nobody there. Out the front, nope. In the driveway, down the street, just nowhere to be found. Still gives me chills thinking about it. Must have been a super interesting TV show to keep you both so distracted. Back in junior high, the first time my parents left town and left me alone for a week. It's going good. I stayed in the basement and the entrance to the hallway that leads to my room had decorative beads hanging in the entranceway. I'm in my room watching TV with my faithful dog, Smokey, laying at the foot of the bed. All of a sudden he starts barking wildly. A bark I'd never heard out of him. Almost a cry. I think something is wrong with him, and just as I almost get a hand on him, he jumps off the bed and dives under it completely silent. I get to the floor to look under the bed for him and I hear the beads in the entranceway start to rattle together as if someone ran into them with a lot of force. I sit there scared shitless for a bit, then grab a bat and investigate. The beads are still swinging with force. Every door and window in the house is still locked from the inside. There aren't any air vents close to the beads and Smokey refused to come out from under the bed for another 2 hours. To this day, I have no idea what caused those beads to rattle. Your dog unleashed the most painfully powerful fart of his life. Was around 2002. I had just married my wife and we had just had our first baby. Bedroom door opened up and hit my wife's side of the bed. Guess she went to get up for the baby in the middle of the night. She went to get out of bed and when she put her feet down on the floor she felt a body. She reached down and lifted an arm. She thought it was me on the floor at first, then she reached over and I was asleep in bed. She started screaming. I woke up. The guy passed out on our floor woke up. I chased him out of the house with a knife. Basically some drunk came in our house and passed out on our floor without our knowledge in the middle of the night. Totally fricked up. I always start reading expecting ghost stories, but when they're real people it's even more scary. I was walking down my hallway at 2 in the morning one night to get a glass of water. Right when I turn the corner a freaking Elmo toy starts asking me to play with it. Scared the living crap out of me. Time to set it on fire. This is when I was in high school. I'm chilling in the living room with my dog sleeping by my feet watching TV, when suddenly, my dog jumps up and runs to the stairs which are right off the living room. Now my dog would normally never bark unless the doorbell rang. This time he went into attack mode, growling, barking, his hair rising on end. Then he would look at me trying to see if I would call him back. I was scared shitless. No one could have come home because you have to come through the living room to get the stairs, so no one could sneak in. After a minute he would not let up. He kept acting like something was there, just something I couldn't see. I had to sit there as my dog was acting like he was ready to rip someone's throat, until finally he walked back to my feet looking proud of himself. I like to think he scared something off that day, but I was very happy when we moved. I hate writing this. Still gives me the creeps. I was like 12, and I was asleep in my family's living room since I was sick and it was winter. My house has terrible insulation and my room was cold, family room was warm, so I was asleep and at around 2 in the morning, I'm woken up to the feeling that someone is right there. I always slept with a flashlight since I read, so it was in my hands and I turn it on and point it in the direction of where I thought the guy was. Right there, just a foot away from me, was a guy staring right into my face. The light hit his face and he turned and ran away. I let out a blood-curdling bloody murder scream and my mom and dad came running downstairs. Turns out he had freaking broken into our house and then stood there staring at me. Shoot, that still creeps me out. He was like Santa, only instead of bringing presents, he brought lifelong recurring trauma. This happened about 15 years ago. My mum works nights as a nurse and my brothers had moved out, so it was only my dad and I home. The night in question, I was reading in bed and my dad was asleep, could tell by the snoring. I heard some light tapping on the front door, which was a sliding glass door. My room had a window that I could see the front door, so I sat up to look out my window. Nothing. I thought meh, could be wind. So I kept reading and heard this really loud scratching on the back door. About 20 seconds later, and it was really loud. So loud it woke up my dad, which was strange. He yells out, "Matt, what the frick are you doing? Get in bed." And I yelled back, "I am in bed." Not a second after the words left my mouth, we heard loud rushed footsteps, sort of soft sounding, like when you run on wooden floors with socks on, towards the front door. As I sat up to look at the front door, while shaking violently, I saw the door just stop sliding. It was open about 8 inches. It wasn't open 20 seconds before when I looked, but I couldn't see anything. My dad ran into my room and checked if I was alright and then went and checked outside and came back in and closed the front door. Checked the back door, which was locked. I couldn't get to sleep and my dad stayed up with me. I was so scared. Also strange about it all, Dad had also locked the front door that night. Dad always used to say goodbye to mum as she left for work and would always lock the door behind her. We didn't really talk about it that night. I must have been about 12 or 13, still innocent. But a few years later we did. We thought it could have been someone trying to rob us or worse. However, we could never work out how they unlocked the front door. It had a pin and a lock you could only unlock from the inside. I tried to convince him it was a ghost. He never took that. I just think we may have been really freaking lucky. The scratching sound on the back door still haunts my dreams, and why scratch on the back door or tap on the front door before entering us metal on metal? They could have been tapping to see if you had any dogs. Do a little tap. See if anything notices. If not, go in. If so, move to the next house. Woke up in the middle of the night not realizing my whole arm was asleep. I lifted my limp arm up and my hand just fell onto my face. The room was pitch black and I couldn't feel my hand because it was asleep, so I thought a random stranger was hanging out in my room and decided to smack me across the face. I woke up one morning and went to stretch my arms under my pillow and suddenly my hand found another hand lying under my pillow. I grabbed on, snapped upright, yanking my hand out from under the pillow, and found myself holding hands with myself. Apparently my left arm was completely asleep and I was too asleep to notice. That sure got the heart rate going. I grew up in a 112-year-old Victorian in Connecticut. While it appeared as though the entire house should have been haunted, the only source of anything creepy was the second floor bathroom that was at the base of the attic stairs. Each of my parents have their own story from that room. My dad tells a story about how one day when he was giving my older brother a bath, who was about 3 at the time, in the white clawfoot tub, my brother stopped playing with his bath toys for a moment. He then calmly looked up at my dad and said, "This is where I died." The white light, and then kept playing again. My dad suspects someone electrocuted themselves in the tub. A few years later, when I was 2 and my dad and brother were off on a Boy Scouts trip, my mom recalls a night where she heard me get up and walk down to the bathroom. She could hear me humming and tinkling. Now I was still potty training, so mom wanted to get up and check on me. When she rolled over, I was lying beside her, and the humming stopped. We moved. I lived with my parents. I was about 16. My parents left me at the house alone while they went out of town. We were from a small town and we had this one crazy old guy that was known as a peeping Tom. Anyway, 16-year-old me decided it would be smart to watch The Shining alone. I'm like quarter way through the movie and I go into the kitchen to get a drink. I look out the window and a face is staring back at me. I lose it. I dropped my drink and ran to make sure the front door's locked. It was. I looked out my front window and saw the old man walking down the road. At my 13th birthday party, I was having a sleepover with some friends. We're all female. About 2 AM I look up and some weird guy in a tux with a top hat and pasty skin is plastered to the window watching us. Screaming commenced. He unstuck himself and kind of skittered away to the middle of the backyard and stared some more, his shoulders hunched, until my dad came to find out why we were screaming. I've posted this before in a similar thread, but it got buried. Here it is. For Christmas 2012, my mom had gotten my dad a really nice watch. By March, he had lost it for a few days, but found it in the cushions of the chair in the living room. Then, in early June, he lost it again. He's totally scatterbrained. He thought he probably lost it in cushions again, so he looked in the couch and the chair and couldn't find it. My brother, my dad, and I decided to look harder and completely tore apart the house looking for it. We had flipped every cushion, checked every drawer, closet, purse, gym bag, beds etc. in the entire house. We looked everywhere and left no stone unturned, so to speak. We still couldn't find it. My dad checked his car, his work, the gym, my grandparents' house, and asked everyone he came across if they had seen his watch. Finally, after a few weeks of diligently searching, he kind of gave up and accepted the fact that maybe someone at his work or his gym stole it, or that he had maybe left it at a doctor's office or something like that. Basically, he had assumed that he would never see it again. Fast forward to the middle of July. My dad works really bizarre hours, and, on this particular day, he had to leave for work at 3:30 AM. When he woke up, my mom and brother were asleep, and I was staying the night at my best friend's house. When he came downstairs, he found the lost watch just sitting on the kitchen counter, face down, as if he had taken it off the night before and set it there. He assumed that one of us had found it after he went to bed the night before, so he texted my mom thanking her for finding the watch. She responded to his text saying that neither she nor my brother had found it, and there was no way I found it and put it there since I was staying elsewhere for the night. My mom had cleaned the kitchen before she went to bed, and there was no watch on the counter. But when my dad woke up, the watch that had been missing for over a month had simply reappeared. No one knows how the watch got there, and my dad still thinks that maybe everyone is fricking with him and that one of us took it and replaced it as a joke. These are my 4 most logical explanations for what happened. 1. My mom or brother sleepwalks and no one knows. Whoever the sleepwalker is took the watch during an episode, hid it while they were asleep, and then retrieved it during another sleepwalking episode over a month later. 2. Someone broke into our house, stole the watch, felt guilty about it, and broke back in the night to replace it, even though that would be fairly impossible because we have a house alarm that we set religiously every night and when we leave. 3. Someone else lives in our house, unbeknownst to us. 4. Ghosts. After my wife had gone to sleep late on evening, I was watching a movie in the living room. I had turned most of the lights off, closed the curtains and the TV sound was turned down so nobody would wake up. We had some break-ins in the neighborhood, so when I heard someone at the front door, I freaked out a little. When I went to look, nobody was there. I went back into my seat and almost nodded off when I heard the door handle on the garden door move only a meter away from my chair. I walked to the window next to the door to peek out the window and saw 3 guys at the door, ski masks on, and one of them had a crowbar in his hand. As soon as they saw me, they bolted out the garden, over the fence. I slept very lightly that night, with a baseball bat and phone by the bed. I would have called the police right then. They were on your property. I remember this story my dad told me about when he was young, probably a teenager. His dad was a mason and carpenter and would buy old run-down houses and fix them up, and then resell them. He told me that this one house his dad had bought was an old, huge house, like an old plantation home. He said he always had weird feelings in the house, and there were rooms they just didn't go in. They tried making his bedroom the top floor room, but apparently when you went in that room you just felt a huge pressure all over your body just pressing down on you. It scared him and his mom so much, they moved him to a different room. My dad and grandma always believed in ghosts, and knew it was haunted, but my grandpa wasn't afraid of anything and didn't think anything of it. The house had a basement, but they just didn't go in it. They knew something was wrong with it. They could just feel it. One day, my grandpa just decided to go down in it and see finally what was in it. So he went down with a flashlight, and after a minute or 2 down there, he came back up visibly shaken and they moved shortly after. He didn't talk about what he saw for some years later. When he finally did tell what he saw, you could tell it was something that had actually scared him. He said there were chains on the walls, shackles on the floor, and some of the chains, like it was an old slave house. He seemed to imply there may have been more, like bones or something, but he couldn't say it. He was just a shaken up. Now this house was in like the middle of Ohio, and it was built after the Civil War, so they have no clue why it was like that. My old house was just creepy. There are no other words to describe it. There are 3 occasions I'll tell you about. Situation 1. It's about midnight. The kids and I are woken up by noises in the basement. Yes, they were still sleeping in bed with my husband and I at that point. I tell my husband it sounds like someone is in the house and to go check it out. We continue to hear doors opening and closing and it sounds like stuff is getting thrown around. We don't have guns, or a dog, or any way to defend ourselves against an intruder. So, I do what any grown woman would do and call my dad. He has 20+ years military experience and a hefty gun collection. So I have my husband sneak out of our room and unlock the door for my dad to come in. Then we all hide in my bedroom with the door locked. Anyway, as you may have figured, the house was completely empty and there was no sign anyone had even been in the house at all. Situation 2. Get home late after a long day at work. It's 2 AM, and my husband is asleep on the couch and the kids are asleep in a pile of blankets on the floor next to him. So I decide to take a bath and relax and unwind before heading to bed myself. While I'm in the tub, someone starts pounding on the door and wiggling the doorknob. I figure it's my 4-year-old freaking out because sometimes she sleepwalks when she has to pee, and so I hop out of the tub so I can open the door and get her on the toilet before she has an accident. When I open the door, no one is there. No one is in the hallway. I grab my towel and walk to the living room and everyone is still right where I left them. All still asleep. Situation 3. It's bedtime again. I am sitting in my bed talking to my daughter, getting her ready for sleep. All of a sudden she starts crying hysterically and hiding in me. Was she hurt? What the heck was wrong? Does she need to go to the ER? I was worried and she wouldn't tell me what was wrong, but she was terrified of something. Finally, she looks up at me and says, "He's standing right there," and points to an empty corner. Who is standing right there? The man with no eyes. I live in a 168-year-old house in a graveyard in Britain. I see gravestones from nearly every window, and there are bodies under the lawn. But the scariest thing is my girlfriend jumping out at me shouting boo. The bee does it every couple of weeks. I did get her back by whispering her name loudly by the bathroom door when she got out the shower and didn't know I was home though. I really wish your friends had written, "Please leave," so you would think a ghost was trying to reason with you. One morning I opened my eyes and my daughter is staring at my face and says softly in a monotone, emotionless voice, "The king has returned," turns around and walks out of the room. What the fluff does that mean? What king? It bothered the crap out of me. I threw off the covers and ran into the living room ready to do some kung fu fighting in my boxers. She was watching The Lion King. That was horrifying. A few years ago, I was living in a house with my brother and 4 or 5 other people. He had just finished his shift at Applebee's and got home around 2 AM. No one else was in the house. We had all gone out drinking, so he was alone in a dark, 100-year-old house. He put his iPod into its speaker dock and went into the kitchen to get a drink. Suddenly he hears a noise. It's a low, not quite growling sound, but definitely organic. It stops. He hears it again, this time higher in pitch, with the sound fluctuating slightly. He slowly creeps through the house, trying to find the source. Every couple of seconds there'd be another long, drawn-out noise, sometimes low-pitched, sometimes high-pitched. Eventually he started wondering if a sick dying rabid raccoon had somehow gotten through a window and was in someone's closet. He grabs a broom for defense and keeps tracking the sound. Eventually he's able to narrow it down to either his bedroom or the room across the hall from his. He stops and listens. He hears the sound again, this time definitely coming from his own bedroom, where he was just a few minutes before. He lunges through the door, whipping the broom around Donatello from TMNT. Turns out there was a MP3 of whale songs on his iPod, and he had accidentally hit play on shuffle mode when he placed it into the speaker dock. Still though, can you imagine hearing whale songs in your dark house at 2 AM? When I was 9-10, my mother would wake my brother and I up for school every morning. I heard my mum calling in a slight panic for my brother. Because I really needed a pee, I got up and went to the bathroom across the corridor and saw my mum looking in and out of rooms while my brother's bed at the end of the corridor was empty. I didn't really know what was happening, but I went to the bathroom, came back out, and there was my brother fast asleep in his bed with my mum freaking out next to him. It's only now I'm older than I understand just how what the frick is going on that situation was. I got this. Our son at the age of 3 would wake up screaming in the middle of the night almost every night because he didn't want to go in the wall. He's almost 5 now, and the last thing he says to my wife and I before bed is don't go in the wall. He doesn't wake up crying about it anymore though. Creepy. Few instances, but this one's fun. Several months ago my wife and I were sitting up watching some TV. After our kids had gone to bed, we heard our 4-year-old son's bedroom door open and then the sound of him rapidly crawling down the hallway toward the living room. We figured he was trying to sneak up on us and doing poorly. My wife mouths watch this and gets up off the couch. She moves toward the hallway and pounces into the entrance to startle our son, only to stand up looking confused. She looks at me and says there's nobody there. We go into our son's room and he's knocked out. So of course we check on our daughters and they're asleep too. I have more. Real life issue. Totally non-supernatural. Long before I met my wife, I started dating this girl who was fun at first and then the crazy came out. I eventually broke it off. She kept calling and making up pretenses that we should get together. One night it was, I have some pictures I want to give you that were taken at my birthday. I told her I didn't want to see her and go to bed. I wake up in the middle of the night, sensing a presence in my room. I roll over to this dark figure looming over my bed and I start to freak. She's suddenly trying to comfort me, telling me she just stopped over to bring me the pictures. My terror turns to rage and I tell her to GTFO. I follow her down and usher her out the door. I lived in the ghetto at the time, actually still do, just different ghetto, and always locked the doors. I have no idea how she got in, but fortunately never spoke to her again to ask how. Went to get a drink of water in the middle of the night. As I was coming back the lights were off and I could see this ghostly figure moving towards me. That same night had just watched Mama, and I actually made a ruug fuuak noise and took a startled step back. It was my so going to the bathroom. The relief that swept over me was a wave of cold realization that I'm an idiot. I lived in a haunted house. Shortly after moving in, I had the feeling that there was someone behind me, particularly when I was cooking. A few months later, I rounded the corner and saw a man standing at the fireplace. I saw him clearly, but he was gone in an instant. I did some research and learned that the home had been built by this man, and that he died in the living room, next to the fireplace, of natural causes. His wife also died in the house years later, and it had been abandoned for 6 years prior to my purchase. They had 2 sons in that house. I felt the man continually, but I wasn't afraid. I had the feeling that he was curious, or protective. Then I gave birth to a baby boy, and the ghost was present daily. I once heard playing sounds in the middle of the night coming from the nursery. The baby was too young to get out of his crib. Later, when my son started to speak, he asked who's the man who plays with me at night. Creepy. When my son was 2, he took what could have been a fatal fall, riding a wheeled toy down a very steep staircase that ended in a wall. I stood horrified, but midway down the stairs my son seemed to be picked up off the scooter and set down on the stair. The scooter crashed into the wall at the bottom, leaving a dent. I couldn't even speak, but I felt the ghost. The last event occurred when metal baker's shelves, stocked full of china and glassware, fell over in the night. The crash was tremendous. I rushed to the basement and saw the shelves lying down on the floor, but instead of scattered and broken china, each piece was neatly stacked on the concrete floor and nothing was broken. I sold the house for other reasons, but no one can live in it. There have been 6 owners in 9 years. Maybe they just need to tell George, that was his name, to leave them alone. He's not a bad guy. Seems like a cool guy. Actually wasn't really that scary, but one day I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was rotated 45 degrees in my bed, and I didn't see the red light of my TV and couldn't feel the wall. So I freaked out and thought I was being abducted. So the first thing that comes into my mind is to start screaming. Then my mom came walking into the room, turned on the light, and I could see I just was rotated 45 degrees in my bed. That must have left a mental scar. Not my home, but my so's aunt and uncle lived in an old home they renovated that had been built on an old Civil War road in the middle of nowhere, no neighbors for miles. Lots of weird crap happened in their house. They were busy doing renovations upstairs and they were waiting on a plumber, so they left their front door open and told him to come in whenever he arrived. When they all met upstairs, the guy said, "Your daughter told me you were upstairs." Rhonda, so's aunt, said, "We don't have a daughter." Well, when I walked in, a little girl was at the bottom of the staircase and I asked her where her parents were and she just pointed upstairs. Another time they were laying in bed and their TV just turned itself off. And both witnessing it, the power went out and a distinct voice came out of the power down TV and it said Rhonda, and then it turned itself back on. I remember them telling me a collector lived there before them and he hid all of his coin collections, vintage comic books, baseball memorabilia in the floorboards and walls of the house. They said to tear apart the house wasn't worth the risk if the collectibles were damaged or not sellable. There was a whole week where things were being moved and lights were turning on and off by themselves. One night I wake up to myself saying go away and there's something black hovering above me. It just kind of drifted to the right and disappeared. Weirdest crap ever. It didn't come back after that. Your house might be haunted. Someone farted in my house and I was the only one home. But then who was fart? I woke up one afternoon and went directly to use my computer. Couple of minutes later, I heard my mom called me downstairs, so I said yeah and didn't got a reply, so I just shrugged it off. An hour later I heard our back door open, so I went downstairs to see who it is and my mom and sister went in. They said they went to the mall to buy something this morning. Kinda related. I always wanted to hide my tablet and old phone with the ringtone set to different recordings of whispering of my roommate's name, then email, message, text, or call it when they're home alone. When I was a kid, one night we all woke up to the sound of our fire alarm going off. My mom ran to where the fire alarm was, right by the back door, and finds the back door swinging open. We had experienced a lot of haunting scenarios in the house. My sister saying a nice old man protected us while we slept, and we believed to this day that someone had broken and the ghost set off the fire alarm to alert us. I came home once. The alarm had triggered. Not knowing if it was an accident or incident, I grabbed my sword and stalked around the house looking for anyone who shouldn't be there. What the frick would have happened if I found someone? My late father was a priest, and when I was 10 and my brother and sister, twins, were 4.5, we lived in this old Victorian vicarage, still had the servants' bells and everything. Anyway, one morning, my brother was sitting eating breakfast, and he just casually started talking about the old lady who always stood at the end of his bed. My dad did some investigating, and it turns out that back when vicars were wealthy enough to have servants, a housekeeper passed away in that room. Creepy Thanksgiving. We used to live in a rural community that was so safe that we never considered locking our doors. One Thanksgiving, though, my daughter and I decided to play with our holiday routine and drive to town for Chinese food. We were a good distance down the road when we both turned to each other and shook our heads. Something felt so wrong that we turned around, drove home, and locked every door in the house. That evening we tried to enjoy our Thanksgiving Chinese food. We really did. But there was something intensely wrong. It felt like there was something outside the house. Suddenly the entire house shook as if someone had exploded a bomb just over our house. Seconds later there was a second glass that nearly shattered our windows. We jumped up and ran outside, but there was nothing there. I can't tell you how hard it was peruse the rooftop. I did not want to see what was up there. We went back inside and locked all of the doors and began calling neighbors. What's interesting is that we later discovered that the blasts came from 2 Aurora aircraft. More interesting, every single one of the people we talked to complained that there was something messing around outside their homes just before the Aurora Skyquakes. Sometimes it was on the roof, sometimes it was in the trash cans, and all of the neighborhood dogs were hiding. Not barking, hiding. One day about a year ago, I was brushing my teeth in my bathroom sink. I look down at the faucet and see a figure standing behind my reflection. I thought my hair was reflecting the dark shape, so I moved it back and turned around to see if there was anything there, and I didn't see anything. I go back to brushing my teeth and look in the faucet reflection, and the shadow has moved to the corner of my room. It's tall, like a grown man. It's black, but not entirely. It looked like it had been charred or burned somehow. I freak out and turn around. There's nothing in the corner. I am freaking out at this point, so I hurry up and brush my teeth as fast as I can. My curiosity gets the best of me, and I look in the faucet reflection again. This time, the shadow is gone, but there is a black shape hovering over the rim of my bathtub, and a black charred hand with long fingers lifts itself up, and then disappears behind the tub. I've got quite a few stories from my creepy house if anyone would like to hear any more. More stories. Gogo 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 gogo. About 2 months ago, my fiance and I had a very stupid argument. I went into our bathroom to get away and sat on the floor with my back to the door. I was crying from pent-up frustration when I felt something like a finger or two running up my back. I turned around quickly to tell my fiance off, thinking he opened the door or maybe I didn't close it. But no, it was closed. What creeped me out is that I not only felt fingers, but my shirt moved up with them, exposing my skin, like they were partially under the bottom of my shirt, and it made it all the way to the middle of my back. I still get goosebumps thinking about it because I know it was real. It wasn't something that I could write off as my imagination. One late night last year I was home alone. A rare occasion. I was up out of bed and, as I walked past the bathroom, the toilet flushed. I was a little confused, checked to see if there was anyone in there and continued down to the kitchen. However, as I walked into the kitchen, the downstairs toilet flushed, the lights went out and the taps wouldn't run. I noped the frick back to my attic bedroom. When I was 12, my mother was in school to become a hairstylist. She was given 3 highly realistic heads with synthetic hair to practice on. I mean, very real, down to the detailed colors of the irises in their eyes. One evening after I had gone to bed, she attached them to the upstairs banister so as to not forget them till next morning. As I came upstairs to pee in the middle of the night, there stood at just below my height the dark silhouettes of 3 freaking people staring at me. Beyond logic, I jumped into the nook where we kept our shoes. I will just stay here until forever now, I thought as my heart tried to beat me to death. I lived in the middle of nowhere, literally bordering national forest on 3 sides with a half-mile long private driveway. The only thing is that I'm perched on a hill you can see from the highway. It's such an ideal location that people are inspired to find my driveway when they see the house perched up there. This all used to make me happy, but as time went on I realized that I was just kind of a sitting duck up there. When I'm in bedroom I realize that anyone could sneak up on me. So, I started locking down my house like Fort Knox before bed. At night I'd hear things. They usually turned out to be bears wandering around. One night, dead of winter, and I am suddenly wide awake. I sit there in the dark for a minute, wondering if I heard something. I never turn on the lights because that would show the ghost murderers exactly where I am. A couple minutes go by and I must have just been imagining things. It's 3 AM. I get up to use the bathroom and walk past a window. That's when I see the guy standing in the middle of my driveway looking up at the house. It was a bright moon and I could just see him standing there plain as day. Driveway was covered in snow. I paused completely still. No way he could see me, and just watched him for like 20 minutes as he stood there, paced a bit, and kneeling to check behind this big rock. After a while of doing this he finally grabs something from behind the rock, a baggie, and walks back down my driveway. I watched him until he was out of sight and then waited with my binoculars to make sure he exited my property. I finally saw him walking away quite a bit later. I have no idea. My grandfather was a mason, and he built a split-level house that I lived in for a while. There was a small room on the lower level with a TV, NES, and a couple small fish tanks. We usually left the light off in that room since the lights made an annoying buzzing noise. Anyway, I was down there playing NES with my uncle one night, and he went to get us some late night snacks, so I was alone in the room. I heard a scraping noise in the hallway and looked up to see a translucent white form of a woman hovering right outside the doorway. She wasn't facing toward me, and it looked like she was moving toward the bathroom, which was at the end of the hall. I was shocked at how much detail I saw. Despite her being partially see-through, she had long, flowing hair that was tucked behind her ear, a delicate nose, a petite chin, and a slender figure that faded into nothingness below about knee level. The whole experience lasted about 8-10 seconds or so, and I know there are probably plenty of scientific explanations for what happened, but I was pretty young and impressionable, and that experience has stuck with me pretty clearly. I do know that one person died in the house, my mother's oldest brother, who died when he was 3, before my mother was even born, until my grandmother passed away of old age a couple years ago. That had been the only death in the house. Many years ago my brother and I stayed at my cousin's house during summer vacation in a fairly rural area. We all had bikes that we would ride and just do what kids do. Every night we would lock up the bikes to his fence and head on inside to chill in the awesome pillow fort we made in the living room. One night we're all sleeping in the fort when I hear a bike bell ringing and a kid laughing. This wakes me up and I think I'm hearing things until I notice the others woke up too. We ask each other if we heard something, and sure enough we all say the same thing. We don't hear anything again, but we figure we should check out on the bikes just in case. This had to be around 2 or 3 in the morning. Everything was pitch black and we only had one flashlight, so we're moving real slow trying not to make noise since we're a bit on edge. Once we get close to the fence we see my bike laying in the dirt a ways away from where we kept them, but there weren't any signs of it being moved. No footprints, no tire tracks, nothing, like it had just been there the whole time. I knew I had locked it up so we checked the fence and my lock is exactly where I had my bike, still locked to the fence. It's as if the bike just passed through the lock and then floated to where it was now. At this point we're too freaked out to do anything so we quickly head back inside and try to go back to bed thinking we'll figure it out in the morning. A few hours later my uncle comes into the living room to wake us up and get ready for breakfast. None of us had fallen back to sleep. While we're eating he tells us we shouldn't be riding our bikes so late at night. We look at each other with wide eyes, but don't say a word. Nothing like that happened again, but I could never sleep comfortably in that house again. To this day we have no idea what happened and almost never talk about it. What creeped me out the most? None of the bikes had a bell on them. This is not me, but a friend of my mom's. She noticed strange things in her house. Food depleting faster than usual, wet towels when she didn't remember having a shower, unlocked doors when she was sure she locked them, etc. This went on for months until she had to get something from her attic, and found homemade sleeping quarters, mini fridge, hot plate, television, etc. Every night a homeless person would climb a tree and sneak into her attic through a window that had a broken latch. She called the cops. They found the guy. She never pressed charges, let him stay for free for 3 months, and now he pays a small amount of rent and lives there legally. Apparently he was a really nice guy that just wanted a home to sleep in. He helps with maintenance, mows the lawn, etc. Went from being creepy to a pretty cool story. A ghost lives in my laundry room. I was doing laundry one day when the clothesline moved on its own. Also, I was home by myself last week and the ghost keep opening the dryer door and slamming it all day. Have you tried asking him to stop? I mean it's just rude. Dita leap beep beep. Hashtag feature me. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.